r/ask Reddit. What's the craziest reason you had to fire someone? We had someone fall asleep at his desk with a lit cigarette in his hand. In an office full of cubicles like maybe 6-7 years ago, smoking wasn't legal anywhere indoors, let alone in an office building LMAO. And the first time he wasn't even fired. He was fired when it happened again. Had a guy on my team start smoking a cigarette at his desk. He was diabetic, and when confronted it was clear he was low on blood sugar. A soda later and he was quickly himself. Dumba stole a $100 bill out of the register at the end of his first shift alone on register. He didn't know about cash balancing? If someone is dumb enough to steal that much out of a register, I don't think knowledge is enough to stop them. Years ago, at a lumber company, had a guy, less than 2 hours after he started on his first day, pick up his car with a forklift and stand underneath it to see what was rattling when he drove. Turned out it was his brain. His head wasn't screwed on tight. I work at an art studio where we teach classes and sell pottery that our artists make for others to paint. I'm one of the artists and the manager. I started getting a funny feeling about one of my employees. She wasn't doing anything blatantly wrong. Just seemed to work really slowly sometimes, request insignificant but kind odd schedule changes, and have different break habits from the other staff. I started feeling like she was stealing, but this is a really small business so I didn't have her on camera or any way to really prove it, until she accidentally sent me a video of herself painting pieces that I made from her home. What an idiot. I worked at a retail store and found one of my co-workers was using the company iPad that we used to play music and order lunches to go on Craigslist and search for hookups. She didn't even bother to delete the search history. CEO ordered me to fire one of my interns because he was trying to hit on one of the other interns the CEO had the hots for. I'm curious how you were told to fire him. Was it just hey fire that guy? Or did he actually say I've got the hots for that intern he's hitting on and I won't stand for it? He said get rid of that guy after that guy asked her to do something after work. Everyone knew that particular intern was off limits. Fired a guy for looking to pay someone to cast black magic on the owner and the owner's family to bewitch them into giving him a raise and, ironically, never firing him. Only reason I found out was because he asked someone else in the office for help in finding a witch doctor to cast the spells and word got round. No one wanted to be in the same room as him after that. When I confronted him he said the devil made him do it so it wasn't his fault. I live in the Middle East. I definitely did not wake up expecting to fire someone for black magic that day. Side note, practicing black magic is literally a death sentence here. He's gonna post about firing his witch doctor. A guy shaved, trimmed off his pubes and left them scattered across a shared desk in a shared office. When confronted, he pulled a George Costanza. Oh, is that frowned upon? Yes. I was a bartender/bar manager. This guy came in one night and said he was an aspiring DJ and asked if we would consider hiring him to come in just on Sunday nights to DJ for us. He said we wouldn't have to pay him at first. He would just take tips and we could renegotiate after he helped to build up our Sunday night crowd. He lasted less than 3 months. He drove away so much business and I got so many complaints. He played the same songs every week and when people made requests for commonly known songs, he had no idea who they, the musicians, were. I had to fire someone who was working for free. He was a nice guy, which is the only reason he lasted as long as he did. This is both sad and hilarious at the same time. I am a chef at an upscale restaurant. The sauté cook has a lobster dish on his station that involves a technique called deglazing that involves alcohol, so in turn the pan catches on fire briefly and flames up. When you do it correctly, hard to do it incorrect, the alcohol is cooked off and the flame goes out. Every time he made this dish he would deglaze the pan, catch it on fire and then blow it out, blowing his own germs and nastiness all over someone's food and everything in the blast radius. That was a week ago. Fired him after he did it multiple times after being asked not to. Maybe it's because of the current state of affairs, but I couldn't believe a trained cook would do that. I am a mere prep cook w decent line experience, and I can't believe someone would do that. Pandemic or not, it's just not what you do. It's like cutting cheese into tiny pieces instead of using a grater. Fired a high schooler because his girlfriend kept showing up and they would disappear behind the racks. I told him his girlfriend was banned trying to not fire him and she kept sneaking back. Worked in an office and they hired a girl from a temp agency to help me. She wouldn't do anything unless I walked her through each step after telling her she had to do it. Hey, an estimate just arrived on the fax right next to you. Complete the quote and send it back. Come to find out she was playing Spider and Solitaire on her computer. She was also sneaking out back in the warehouse. Guys thought she was doing drugs. I told my boss get rid of her. I would rather work alone than babysit her, so he called the temp agency and told them to stop sending her. She showed up the next day, so boss sent her home and called the agency saying hey, she is useless, stop sending her. She showed up again the next day. This went on for over a week. The people at the temp agency said they told her to stop showing, but she kept coming in every morning. Mind you, usually 10 to 20 minutes late. My boss wouldn't say anything to her face, so finally I said hey, we can't afford to pay you, so we had to let you go through the temp agency. They should have told you. She was all oh, I thought they were joking. I was so glad she was gone. Imagine being so useless that working alone is literally easier. They stole a $3 bottle of wine that could have easily put on the house check for employees. Prep cook stole a 25-pound bag of onions. One thing I loved about working in a restaurant was getting stuff in bulk. We could always ask my boss for 25 pounds of onions and he'd buy them at the restaurant supply depot and sell them to us at cost. Same for cakes, meat, base ingredients, whatever. It was dope. One of our cooks was also a sushi chef. One time we had the boss pick up just a duck ton of sushi stuff and sashimi grade fish. The sushi dude then taught us how to make sushi and we ate like kings for a couple days. The difference was, we always paid for it, and if the boss needed us to work an extra shift, cover someone who no-showed, or even help him clean his pool, then we always said yes. Plus he's hook us up with free beer constantly. LOL, this is a good example of symbiosis in humans. I use you. You use me. Neither is harmed. Expensive $3 bottle of wine. And a duck ton of onion. At a retail job, we had a kid come in and punch in for the day, then go home. Would come back at quit-in time and punch out. We use separate attendance and pay software. We had someone punch into the pay software at 5 AM. Go home. Come back and work his scheduled 5 PM to 10 PM. And clock out at 10 PM. Opening and closing crew aren't too familiar with each other, so he wasn't caught until Big Boss, who is normally a mid, came in early one day and saw him doing it. Wait, so instead of getting paid for his 5-hour shift, he was banking on no one noticing the MPM issue and getting paid for 17 hours a day? I'm a payroll person and that makes my head hurt. Not my personal experience, but one fellow contractor had a safety guy for 6 months. One weekend he took a trip out of town for non-work related reasons, but used the company truck and charged it all on the company credit card. On his way up there he ran a random person off the road, who just so happened to be one of the owners of another contractor who works closely with the one who employed this guy. Shortly after he was fired, and I'm sure criminal charges were being brought against him. A couple weeks later his wife calls his former employer saying he had called her randomly and killed himself in his truck on the side of the highway. Me and another colleague went searching for records of this guy. Couldn't find anything, no claims of a suicide in the local paper where he supposedly killed himself at. Thought it was weird, but whatever. It turns out this guy falsified all his qualifications and job experience. Fast forward a month later, and I heard through the grapevine that the original contractor who had employed this guy received a call from some contractor across country because he applied for work there and put them down as his previous employer. He faked his own death to get out of trouble with the company, then proceeded to put them down on his resume, not expecting anyone to check his references. LOL. It astounds me how people in the construction industry don't think anyone knows anyone, or that their reputation will in fact get around. Everyone knows everyone. He also sounds like someone I worked with previously who got fired for similar reasons, as well as being a racist, sexist jerk. The guy had somehow hung on by the skin of his teeth when caught making plastic model funny cars at his desk. Pro tip: throwing a newspaper over the model doesn't hide the smell of the glue, but when a client called complaining about our hero trying to sell him golf clubs out of the trunk of his car, he was gone. In the early 2000s I managed a coffee shop that required the customers' names to be put on the cup. One guy looked like he was doing it, but upon closer inspection on some cups he was writing an IP address. Turns out he was running an illegal sports book out of the shop. He did quit before I had to technically fire him because he found out I knew. Had a food and beverage manager that brought a coffee into his female assistant manager on inventory day when the two of them would be alone performing inventory. She drank about half the coffee, started feeling dizzy and saw there was a heavy table pushed up against the door. She freaked out and got out of the area. She went to HR and they tested the coffee and it was roofied. Definitely the most interesting firing I was involved in. Had an employee that was going to get fired for simply showing up late constantly with no legit reason. During the term meeting she tells me another employee cut the brake lines in her car. It's obvious this was to save her from being fired. She didn't realize that something like that gets cops involved. She was termed, and then detectives showed up to her house to get statements. Of course, no evidence of lines being cut and now she's dealing with police for making false statements. A guy told a female co-worker he wanted to take her newborn baby home with him to inspire his wife to have one. Dude was creepy as duck before that, but the complaint she made to management was what got him cut loose. He denied ever having said it, despite corroborating statements from other employees and a couple customers. Profanity-filled road rage ran through an ambulance PA system at a crowded intersection. I had complaints coming in for well over a month. I feel that an ambulance should be allowed to chew you out over the PA for shit driving. I was a florist and had a 40-something woman delivering for me. I received a call from the building manager of a brand new office building, with only one tenant, telling me my driver wrote on the elevator wall with a Sharpie. They had video showing that she was the only person to use the elevator during the time the vandalism took place. The worst part for me was, this happened a few days before Valentine's Day. When I was a bank teller, a fellow teller got fired for stuffing her purse with a strap of $100s every day, $10,000. Here's the interesting part. She always put the strap back into her teller drawer at the end of the day. She did this for months and months apparently without anyone noticing. But when the camera auditors finally did catch it, she was confronted and fired. When they asked her why she put a strap of money in her purse each day but always put it back, she said that if the bank were ever robbed then she could just take the money home because everybody would have assumed it was taken by the robber. I work for a hotel. Had to fire 2 separate employees on 2 different occasions for letting people in vacant rooms to smoke crack and steal from the rooms. Used to work at a laser tag facility. It was mostly high schoolers who worked there. One guy had only been working there a couple months when he came in on a field trip with some classmates, including his girlfriend. He thought it would be a good idea to sneak his girlfriend into the fog room inside the maze during their game, have sex, then brag about it to the management team. Underage sex at work is, and surprisingly, not something you should be engaging in. And definitely not something you should be publicizing. We'd also hold these overnight events where you'd come in from midnight to 6 AM and play all night long. Had a guy show up reeking of booze and clearly high on cocaine to work that shift. He got fired on the spot, and I'd occasionally run into him on the bus afterwards. Man, that was the best job though. I have so many insane stories from those times. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.